Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to part two of the Health and Wealth podcast. Hope you enjoyed part one. Part two is just going to be just as exciting and filled with great content. Thank you for joining us. Walter, you're back?
Yeah, I'm back.
All right, welcome back. Okay, so we were talking about basically self-improvement, and you actually brought up some pretty good points, Walter, in terms of there's definitely certain things that need to be taken care of in one's life in order for you to even have the luxury to be thinking about self-improvement, right? And that's actually, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Abraham Maslow or Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
So you said
Yeah,
liquor. I was like, no.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, I've
so
heard it too.
it's interesting, right? Because obviously there's certain things that there's certain needs that have to be met in order for you to start to think about anything else, right? So there's basic needs. You obviously need food, water, warmth, and rest. And then there's safety, which is what you touched on, people in war-torn countries and things like that. So you need your security, you need your safety. And then past that, obviously, it's important to have a sense of belonging and love, right? So you need intimate relationships and you need friends. And then certain esteem needs, which is like prestige and feeling of accomplishment. And then past that is where you get to now the luxury of starting to think about self-actualization to try to achieve your full potential, including stuff like creative outlets and just different things. Now I think we actually, if you really think about it, we're in the top of that hierarchy of needs, right? We kind of have the luxury to be able to even have these conversations in relative peace and in safety.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So I mean, I think, is it possible not to have your basic needs accomplished and still be self-actualized? I mean, I think there's people who can do it, but those are like monks and things, right? They actually go out in discomfort.
I think actually there is, because you see stories of people who do it. I just wanted to bring that up, what I mean, that some people might be harder than others, but there's people who come from those circumstances, like terrible circumstances, and make it somehow.
Yeah, and they come to it with like a different sense of hunger as well, right? Because they know what it's like to not have. So now when they have, they can cherish it a lot more, and they work even harder, and they do, what I mean? Like they're able to achieve a lot more just because they have that hunger that drives them. So there's always there's two sides to it always. Because I also think adversity, if you don't have adversity, you're unlucky, right? Like if you grow up in relative comfort, you're unlucky because there's no character building mechanism there for you.
Did I say it loud for the people in the back?
There's no character building mechanism there for you. Honestly, like how are you going to get better? How is it like there's nothing to drive you to get better. You have everything that you could ever want. Everything that somebody that if you want, in terms of pleasure, you can have it just like that. So by the time you're 18, 19, 20 or whatever, that's when stuff really, when life really gets real, that's when you'll start to feel a little bit of adversity. Mm-hmm. I was listening to Joe Rogan, and he actually brought up this point where a lot of the things, because he's obviously a successful man now, right? But a lot of the things that made him successful are the very same things that he's trying to protect his children from.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know what I mean? You don't want your children to have to go through certain things, but it's through going through those things that will make them appreciate success and be able to actually strive for a sustained period of time to get the things that they want. If they don't have that, then it's impossible for them to build character.
But you don't think he can build a character for them though, as their parent?
Huh?
As a parent of his kids, you don't think he can build the character that they need?
He can't. He can guide them in directions that they can build character, sure, but he can't do it for them. Like how, you know what I mean?
He cannot do it for them, but like most of like what you call, for most people, I would say the key, what you call it, the key things that their parents teach them, it stays with them, even if it's not like 100% they use it. They probably use most of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I hear you. Okay, so let's say like Warren Buffett would be teaching his kids how to invest, right? How to invest money so you don't have to necessarily worry about money and things like that. But like there's certain things in life that if you don't go through them, nobody can prepare you for. You know what I mean? So there's that, like nobody can prepare you for certain elements of like things to go wrong. You have to develop a feel for things going wrong in order to know how to deal with them. You know what I mean? In order for people to learn how to change a tire, one of your tires has to come off sometime. Mm-hmm.
So let me ask you, let's say if you're in a position that, you know what I'm saying, you went through some struggle to get to where you are. How, like, what would some of be, like, maybe some of the tactics or some of the, you know, things that you would use in order to maybe help your fortunate children, you know, understand how the world works and understand how to, you know, overcome struggle and, you know, understand the.
You know, I like the parents that like that they kind of expose their children to like, so certain people, they might actually visit the neighborhood where they grew up. Like if you're rich, right, you visit the neighborhood where you grew up with your kids, or you know, you expose them to certain, so that they're not like in a bubble of just rich people and like wealthy elites. You expose them to different people so that they know how to interact with different people, and they can learn, instead of learning necessarily from their own experience, they can learn from the stories that they're sharing with the people around them. But if the people around them are all kind of in the same bubble that they're in, then it's very difficult to really learn those lessons. I mean, where are you going to learn them from? So I like that. I like those ways of doing things.
Yeah, because I kind of agree with that. Because obviously, you definitely want, you know, you want, you know, your son or daughter to kind of go through that, to kind of, you know what I'm saying, not to go through hell and back, but you know, have some obstacles in the way. So in life, when they go through them by themselves, they're good. You know, there's like, oh, I've been through this before.
Yeah, exactly. And some parents, like, they'll put their kids like through like, you know, stuff like martial arts training. You know what, by the way, like even that stuff, like just being in a controlled environment and learning how to deal with difficult situations in like a simulated controlled environment, that can build character. You know, getting your kids in sports, that can build character. You know, it doesn't necessarily have to be the, you know, so you have to get shot at in order to know, not necessarily, but you know, I think there's soft ways of introducing some adversity into your kids' lives, so that they're not constantly dependent. They're not living too cushy of a life. I obviously don't have kids. I'm not a parent, so but like.
No, none of us are, but you know, it's for our experiences. Like, you know, I'm saying it's good to have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's just good to have these discussions early before you even have, you know, kids of your own, so that you know you understand what could be in store.
Yeah, that's the most important part. And speaking of kids, the next step I want to get into is if you could change education, what would be maybe a subject you would implement, maybe things you would take out, like from education from K through 12? What would be the education curriculum that you guys would want to change?
So I think with education, there has to be some sort of like fundamental change of education where at some point we learn lessons of like real life and how to apply stuff in real life. In school, you don't really learn a lot of stuff that you're gonna use in like real life unless you're in a certain like field. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whether
You
it's
know,
like whether it's like cooking classes, something simple like that, like that should be
mm-hmm.
taught. You know what I'm saying? Even at a younger age, wait till you go to high school. But I think high school because from 14 to 18, you don't realize it, but them years go quick. Then when you're 18, 19, 20, if you don't have your shit
Mm-hmm.
figured out, that now it's a problem. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, 100%. And even things like, we were talking about money and things like that here, right? People have to use and deal with money their entire lives, right? But then, like, in school, you learn little to nothing about it. And in fact, all of the lessons that you would learn in school are all electives. Yet, things like math and uh, science and different things, those are mandatory. Everybody has to take a science class. Everybody has to take this class, that class. But realistically, all of the mandatory classes should be the classes that directly impact the rest of your life outside of high school, right?
That's why I made the distinction between high school and like other stuff. And other stuff you could teach math history from kindergarten to 8th grade. For the most part, you're learning variations of it in high school, just at higher levels.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get to high school, you should start transitioning more into other things.
Yeah, 100%. 100%.
And there should be a curriculum where if you do want to learn like math and stuff like that, they push you towards careers where you'll use the math or you'll use science. Like it should be career-based driven or like life-based driven in high school.
Yeah, because there's a lot of people who graduate high school and don't even want to go to college. They want to go to a trade school or something and learn something.
Well, not even that. It's just simple things. Like people who graduate high school don't know how to do laundry. Like, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so
Yes.
it's simple things. Like like for example, like driving a car, you gotta pay for that. That should just be in the high school curriculum. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah. With driving a car?
I feel like it, because then you can use it for truck driving or whatever you want to use. Like, I think it's important to know how to drive a car.
True. I mean,
unless you live in the city or something like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. There might be a good reason why driving school is separate, right? But I don't really know.
I understand it because, you know what I mean, with it's gonna get tricky where like kids are gonna crash and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But there should be other things that like at least make high school career and life based driven.
Yeah, instead of like just like the fact that the smartest kids in the school are learning, like the smarter you get, the deeper you get into the useless subjects that you're not going to use ever in life. Yeah.
I don't use most sciences I learned. I don't even use them. I don't even like. What's the point of that?
It's academics, right? It's academics. That's what school is, and I think that's just it's a misuse of the education system just to learn about things that are academic, that are just like oh, so that I know this. You can answer a bunch of trivia questions. Like, congratulations. It's nuts. It's crazy. That's why, I think yes, I will send my kids to school, but I think also like there's a responsibility for parents to, first of all, learn a lot of the stuff that their kids need to learn and teach it to them at home. All right. Like I would even say like, if a kid has to go to school, there shouldn't be as much homework.
Yeah, that's another problem too. Like this way too much homework.
There shouldn't be as much homework because you're already learning all of that stuff inside the school, and you're
for 8 hours straight.
Like, yeah, is that for 8 hours, and then you have to go home and do more work.
Yeah,
it's nuts. In fact, when you're at home, you should be getting credit for like the extracurricular stuff that you do. You know what I mean? Like, okay, so fair enough. Oh, you've gone to school and you've learned math, English, science, all of these things. Fine, right? But there should be extra credit for, have you learned, have you learned a little bit of personal finance in your personal time? Have you learned a little bit of this and that? Because like that, for me, that translates directly to how we operate in the real world. Because a lot of people they go to work and they do the things that they have to do at work, and then during the time that they have free, they should be able to educate themselves on the things that are actually going to help them in their personal life, right? And that's the direction that education should be going to, right? Like people, okay, fine, go to school, but at the end of the day, also do a few things to make sure that you're ready for the real world, and
So
really give credit for that.
how early do you think they should start teaching this?
How early?
Yeah.
I mean, it depends on what. I think freshman year of high school is early enough to learn personal finance.
100%.
Yeah, you might argue even earlier than that, but I definitely think freshman year of high school.
Yeah,
Um,
I was gonna argue a little bit earlier, like maybe like 6th, 7th grade, because that's when you really gonna start like wanting to use money, even though you can't get a job. So before you have that money,
mhm.
they should be able to teach you right there and then. You know what I mean?
Yeah, okay, I see that.
Because imagine if you learned how to start investing at like 12, you just put like $5 away for every month, like something small. You know what I mean?
Yeah. That's why sometimes I just feel like there's a conflict of interest in our education system, right?
Yeah. Well,
Because
the other problem
there,
is it's not the same everywhere. Like it's not like we live in America, but like you could be in Texas and New York and learn two different things about the same exact topic.
oh, that's a great. Oh my gosh,
Especially
I have,
when it comes to history too. Like you know what I mean?
and I have an interesting anecdote about that, right? So, like, obviously, I've been fortunate enough to have learned in like 3 different kind of systems, right? So, like, I learned in the Kenyan system for a little while, and I learned in the British system in Belgium, and then I also learned here. So, like, the interesting stuff, the history stuff tripped me out because we were learning about King Leopold. I don't know if you guys know who King Leopold is. You guys,
Nah.
okay, so
Well, I maybe heard of him, but I don't really know him right now.
okay, so King Leopold was the king of Belgium at one point in time, like during the like around. I think it's around the time of the Second World War, maybe a little bit earlier. But it was during the time where African colonialism was going on, right? There was, they had conventions in Europe about how to partition all of the African countries amongst the Europeans. And when I learned about him in Belgium, I learned a heroic story about who this guy was, right? So I learned like, oh, he went to Congo when he freed the people of Congo type of thing, right? And I went to Kenya believing that. And then when I learned about him again in Kenya, it was like, nah, this dude, first of all, he has a bigger death toll than Adolf Hitler himself.
Oh no, I did see about this. Now you say that I did read about this recently, actually, like a couple months ago.
Yeah, like it's nuts, right? Like,
yeah, they have like concentration camps and everything.
Yeah, it was great, but you don't learn about that in Europe. You do learn about it in Africa.
I didn't learn about it, and I'm Kenyan. Like, you know what I'm saying?
You know what I'm saying? It's crazy.
Yeah.
But that, like, I think at that point, I lost a little bit of faith in the education system because the school I was going to, by the way, is a good school. It's a really, really good school in many, many other areas, right? But like that, for me, stood out to me as like, oh man.
Yeah, the problem is if you win in history, you get to tell the story, and then you could leave the parts that you don't want people to see. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that happens here too. That's why I feel like world history is an important thing to learn. Like every year you learn about American history, and you learn the same things from kindergarten until you graduate high school. You know what I mean? Like how many times you gonna tell me about George Washington?
Oh my gosh.
Or the Constitution? That was in 1770. Tell me what happened after 1960. Like we don't learn from 1970 to 2000. We don't learn nothing about that. And that's recent modern history that can actually help us. But we gotta learn about we bought Mexico in 1846. I don't care about that.
It's like the dates, man. Those things ruin my life, man. I hate like learning dates of stuff, man. I really do. Like it's a waste of space in my mind. I don't care, really. Give me the story.
Well, I think more modern history is more important to learn than like actual like all the way back every year at the year.
Yeah.
Modern history, you can find a pattern. You see, hold up, I've seen this before. So when
Mhm.
you see someone on TV saying some bullshit, you all know like, nah, that's not what happened, or that's not what we should do.
Yeah, it's mad. It's mad. There's so much that could change in the education system, and that's why I
Yeah, and I
just
feel
think.
like at a young age, kids should learn more languages and more cultures.
Mhm.
You know, because when you go to school, you basically know how to speak English.
Mhm. And you know what? Even they tried to teach us language, but like it's so like I learned French for about 6 years. Do I speak French? No, I don't speak any French because the way they teach it, I don't know. Like I don't know. They have to figure out a better way to teach languages because like you have to like I don't know. You have to do a lot of work by yourself in order to learn those languages.
Yeah, but at a younger age, it's easier to learn languages. So if you just keep it consistent, you're gonna know it eventually.
But also
And if
at a
you learn
younger
about other cultures,
but also at a younger
and you
age,
learn
you
about other
learn.
cultures too.
Yeah, at a younger age,
Now I'm about to
you
say,
learn languages differently. You don't learn them the
probably,
way you learn them in school, because like how do kids learn, right? It's like they'll hear like their mom saying certain things a bunch of times, and then they'll try it out, and they'll say it a bunch of times, and they'll like what I'm saying. It's like very interactive, right? And like when you go to school, they have such an academic way of doing things that that's not the best way. Like the best language learners are the people who actually go to the places where those languages are spoken and try to speak those languages in those environments. Rather than trying to learn
yeah,
certain things in a school setting. So I think it's even
yeah.
more. Mm.
I
Go
seen
on.
a dude, some white guy in what you call it, in Kenya. He
Mm.
was from Sweden, but my man was speaking full Luo. Like if you
Fluent.
close your eyes, you would have thought it was African. Like,
Yeah.
I'm
Oh my
sitting there
God.
watching this video, like, yo, bro, what? I didn't even think it was possible. Like,
But yeah, there you go, man. And I've met somebody like that. Like I was selling, like my auntie was selling was like is like a painter, right? So like she was selling her paintings and I was helping her. And some white dude, like he was like a college professor, approaches us and just starts speaking Swahili, like just like perfect Swahili, like completely and I was sitting there like, wow, you speak better than me. How is this possible?
yeah,
I felt a little embarrassed because I couldn't keep up. I was like, Jesus Christ. Oh my God. But you see, there we go. And if you ask these guys, how did they learn the language?
they live there.
Exactly. You just have to immerse yourself in that culture in order to learn the language. Really. Because even if you learn it in like a very textbook way, you're never going to be able to communicate in that way because people won't understand you. Because people on the streets, they don't talk like that.
Mhm.
Well, first of all, you got to get people from these actual places to teach it. That's the problem. You got to use Spanish, so like, come on, man.
No, yeah.
Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
like, you know what I mean? Like, if you never lived in any of these places, how you going to teach me this language?
Yeah. So I think even like now that we have technology and things like that, like there's much better ways to like really learn languages because you can call like right now you can call up a stranger in Brazil if you're learning Portuguese and try and have a conversation. Like it's probably if you wanted to do that, you could do it. You know what I mean? And there's people like who speak other languages that want to learn English. I like to call up English speakers and speak to them.
Yeah.
Like, really.
But the reason why I was saying that I brought the languages is because you got to expose kids to other cultures so they're able to move comfortable in their life. When they meet other people, you don't have like other problems or like racism and stuff like that. And not that that's gonna solve it. You're always gonna have it, but so people are ignorant to other cultures and they're open-minded too. So when they hear other stuff about our country, what we do, they're not going to just deny it or just be like against it 100%.
Mm-hmm. No, 100%.
Or people are willing to go out there. Because if you learn other languages and you learn about other cultures, you'll be more willing to go out there. Maybe you find a job out there that pays more than you over here.
Yeah, 100%. Exactly. And that's the thing. Like the world is it's becoming closer, right? We're more global than we've ever been. So, and I
There's
think
only really a few countries that aren't connected.
there's a few countries that what?
Like aren't really connected in terms of like trade and stuff like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Like
Yeah.
with good relations.
Yeah. But we're also lucky to be English speakers because like a lot of what goes on in the world is in English, right? Or gets translated to English, you know. So I think as English speakers we kind of get spoiled because we don't need to necessarily learn any other language like that. But
Because the dominant countries, mostly a lot of people speak English.
mm-hmm. Like even if you go to certain countries in Europe, you know, they'll speak their own language and English.
English. Yeah, you might see like the street signs. They got one language in their language, the other one in English.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That is true.
What was that about? The education system.
Yeah. Also, I think like with private education, there has to be a way to get it a little bit cheaper, so people like with lower classes, they want that, they have the access to that. But I don't know how one would even go about doing that.
Yeah, you know, and I spoke about this in the last podcast, right? Where I think the existence of public education is what makes private education so expensive, right? The fact that there's like, I mean, I don't, like, you're right. I'm not like quite versed on how schooling works and education works in order to say this with my chest, but I would just say, like, I would think that if, and I said it last time, right, where I think that like if most education was privatized, then it would be cheaper. You know, it would be cheaper because there would have to be a level of competition. And yeah, there would be, you would have to instill some regulation to make sure that whatever teachers are teaching are first of all qualified and well educated, well versed in whatever it is that they're teaching, and are motivated to teach the right things, obviously. But you should be able to select the type of education and that you want and the educators that you want teaching your kids. And then I would think that not only would the education be cheaper, but also the best teachers would be getting paid more than they currently are.
Yeah, that's another thing too with education where like teachers aren't paid really fairly. At least like in like K through 12. I don't know about college, but a lot of teachers have to buy their own supplies.
Yeah.
For kids.
Mm-hmm. And like, if you think that, you know, teachers are the people that are literally shaping our next generation, they should be the best. They should absolutely be the best in class that you could find in every way possible, and they should be compensated that way. You know, it shouldn't be like some standard, you're a teacher and you've had a certain amount of time within this, so you get paid this, and it's like standard. And that standardization is because of government interference, right? But if it was just like, you know what, you're skilled, most of your students seem to perform well, or they like not even like perform well in tests, right? But like if you have a track record of producing students that go on to do well in higher education and eventually in their jobs, then you should be getting compensated to fit that track record, right? So teachers should almost
But
be like, go on.
no, how would you be able to tell like these teachers are responsible for these students going higher? Are you saying like pay the school more money so they can pay the teacher more money?
Well, not necessarily even pay the school more money. Like the teacher, okay, so like for me, okay, so how would you know that the teacher is responsible for it? Well, if a track record is big enough,
like one subject. They don't teach all 10 subjects. Most of them teach like one subject.
Okay, yeah, that's true, right? But like, there's a certain, obviously, yes, they'll teach one subject, but there's a certain intangible also to being a teacher, leading a child in the correct way to be successful, not just to pass a test, but to actually be successful. Like, think about it, for example, in terms of sports, right? The best coaches in the world, like you think about like an academy coach, right? The best academy coaches are defined by their track record. How many of these academy students from your team, or these academy coaches from your team, end up to make a successful career out of themselves? And that's the leverage that you command as an academy coach. So that means we're going to pay you at this level, or you're going to leave and go somewhere else if we don't pay you fairly. So like this teacher should almost be like an independent contractor that goes into the school in order to provide better education, rather than like just somebody that's just a part of the education system and kind of gets lost just based off of their rank, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but I think another thing too is sometimes the people in charge of this education system have never even worked in education themselves. So you have to have a law that says, yo, you can't have nothing to do with education unless you have this experience with this results.
Yeah.
Because the person right now, Secretary of Education, she worked in finance. She never been in the school. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but there's okay, obviously, yes, you want to have somebody in there that's good at working with kids, has experience in working with kids, but also there's a huge advantage to also having somebody that's been in the workforce and understands what these kids are going to face when they go into the workforce, right? And they can relate from that level, So
yeah, but you can't. I'm talking about you can't run the whole school system for the country. If you, how are you going to do that? If you, what you call it, you never worked in education at all, like zero.
If you've never worked in education at all,
that hookup game is crazy.
yeah, but
That's another thing we talk about.
How does that happen? I think.
Well, that's another thing we can talk about. Like, there's a lot of people in government who have never really worked in positions at all. They just find these positions.
Yeah, they just find themselves in like these.
Like, for example, the Secretary of State, like the president who's supposed to be diplomacy for the country, right? Whether we go to wars or whatever it is, says it told. He was he worked in like the oil. I think he was like what was he? He owned like Exxon or something like that. Like he never worked in the military, nothing like that. So this happens all the time.
Yeah, he just finds himself in a position because he knows somebody that knows somebody.
Basically.
100%. Yeah, so for me, that's why, like, that's all for me. That seems like bureaucracy. That seems like government. That seems like government interference. So that's why I'm saying like a lot of our education should be like private. It should be privatized, and we should be able to pick the best. Right? We should be able to pick the best teachers to teach our kids. And maybe like even homeschooling is what's going to be there for the future, because like with this coronavirus, we've definitely demonstrated that it's possible for kids to learn at home, right? That they don't need to necessarily be inside a classroom in order to do that. So you could be able to contact, so like say there's like some mandatory subjects that your kid has to learn. You should be able to pick the educators as a parent right? You should be able to pick, okay, so this is the person that I want my kid to learn from math, this, right? And be able to pick them. And then like each period they learn from these 5 or 6 educators.
So I think like that's where I think your idea where you were saying it's good to have people who weren't in education who are in the workforce. I think that's where you could apply that, where they could create these companies where they provide teachers with jobs and stuff like that. They get all the right things they need, put it together, market it, and then sell it as, you know, this is a home education, whether it's K through 12 or just kindergarten, first grade, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You package that out there. I think that's what that would work in that situation.
Yeah. And in fact, if you look at even like the rich, like how do the rich, like famous celebrities, how do they do education? They don't send their kids to school all the time. Some of them do, but a lot of times it's homeschooling stuff. And they handpick the people that like are going to educate their kids, right?
Yeah.
And now we're getting closer to a situation where that can become more accessible to the vast majority of us because of technology, you know?
We're getting to the 3-minute mark.
Okay. I think honestly that's pretty good for this episode. What do you guys think?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's definitely fine. Yeah, that was a great conversation. Because I mean, obviously, if I could make a suggestion, it's definitely maybe, you know, just talking about the curriculum. Maybe do projects based on, you know, like, you know how they have the baby project, we have to take care of a baby, like that's type of similar. Maybe do that for, you know, maybe when it comes to maintaining bills, or maybe games that you can create where you have to, you know, actually be an adult and maintain bills, pay bills, do these things on time, and kind of get them to be, you know.
Yeah. Okay. So like throughout the year.
Yeah, as I was gonna say, it has to be done for the year. You can't do it for like a month or two. You gotta be like for the whole year.
Yeah. So like throughout the year, you get a certain amount of, let's call them credits, right? And you can allocate them to certain things that need to be maintained, right? And they could be virtual, or they could be stuff that actually impact you inside the school or whatever it is. And your ability to do that will kind of, yeah, I mean, that could work. I mean, I don't know, like you would have to think through it and figure out how that would work. But that, I mean, yeah, that's a really good way of educating people on what to expect once they get out of school.
Do you think that there has been efforts to do some of this stuff and then it just gets denied?
I think homework is probably an effort at keeping kids accountable in that way, but I don't think it's the most efficient way of doing it because it's not realistic.
No, I was talking about like stuff like we're talking about, like these changes of like the education of teaching this rather than that. Do you think people have tried to do it, then it just never happens for whatever reason? And why do you think that would happen? Why would it be denied?
Me personally, I think it's government interference. I think it's the fact that like the government tends to keep things the same. Look at the U.S. Postal Service. Look at most things that are government ran. They tend to like to keep things pretty the same. So there's no need to innovate when something is government regulated. But when things get into the private sector, then people can have creative ideas and implement them and see what works and what doesn't. So I think government interference or government regulation kind of slows down these transformative processes that need to happen sometimes. That's just my opinion.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for joining us for episode 2. I am your host, John Joga.
And I'm Collins.
And this is a wrap for episode 2 of the Health and Wealth Podcast. Catch us on Spotify, Anchor, YouTube, and many more apps where you can get exclusive content. Thank you for joining us.
Peace.
Bye-bye.